Growing up on Mount Hermeneutics, in Genesis 14, we find a war break out among League of Kings and epic struggle to, the remnants of Nimrod's old empire. And for about 12 years, King Chedorlaomer kind of rules the region until the 13th year, and others start to, they rebel. Well, at one point, Chedorlaomer goes ahead and sacks Sodom, and with that, takes all their stuff and a guy named Abraham, yes, that Abraham, his nephew Lot. Well, Abraham's having nothing of that. So he immediately, uh, what does he do? Oh yeah, he goes to war with Gedaliah and he wins and he gets all the stuff back and he gets his nephew back. He's riding high. In verse 12, he was already told that he's gonna birth a big nation. He got called by God. Later on, he marries a baddie, right? So he gets met in the Valley of Kings, and all the kings that aligned with him, they were fighting Chedorlaomer. They come out and basically congratulate him. And then this figure kind of comes forward and he blesses Abraham. Abraham immediately recognizes his authority and gives him a tenth of everything that he just got. Now he is the king of Salem and also the priest of the Most High God. And he blesses Abraham in the name of the Most High God. So who is this Melchizedek cat? And then he vanishes from the pages of Genesis. Was he a priest king? What does his parents mean? What does this brief encounter with Abraham have to do and echoes all the way through the all the way into the book of Hebrews? Well, we're gonna come up with some answers to that. Just keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. No, he made it up.
Oh, you
Not
actually made
not
up this concept.
not today, but he made it up.
Yeah. There's no ecclesia.
Ooh,
Like if you
new
look up,
heresy from Brian.
it's not a heresy.
Look at the big heresy of Brian.
Not my opinion. It's the truth.
Even though you made it up.
This is also terrible show content. We should move on.
You brought it up.
We're going to jail.
I know this show is getting removed from all the platforms that I said we're going to be on. Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. And, if you're seeing our faces right now, that's where you're catching it on YouTube. And if that's the case, go ahead and subscribe and like the video and share it with everyone you've ever met in your entire life. And let's get this algorithm rolling, huh? And if this is your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Matt. That's Brian. Fellas, what's happening?
That was easily in from a comparative ratio of length of intro to amount of biblical supporting text. That was easily the longest intro we've ever done for the shortest amount of biblical scripture.
The intro is longer than the dude.
That's what I'm saying.
Mentioned in the text, like,
yeah.
Wait.
I felt like Brian and I were looking at each other like, he's still in his intro voice.
I was wondering if one of us was going to interrupt him. Like,
I started to be like, bro, we're still in the intro, but then I didn't want to break him and him have to start all over again and do it again.
I was thinking of that scene from Young Guns where Charlie Sheen, he's praying over their food, and it's just this long, like, interminable prayer, and then Billy the Kid, food's getting cold, Dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a couple weeks, fellas. What's been going on?
Let's think. Let me think. I I'm just getting ready for the Atlas 3I object to show up.
That's what you did all weekend? You got ready for the
That's
Atlas?
just what's going on. That's
So So
what
I
it's
owe Brian a public apology. I owe him an
Whoa,
apology, and I'll make it public. This weekend, I was in Tulsa at the Marine Corps Ball, the Marine Corps League Marine Corps Ball, and Sean rode up with me. It was last minute. Carrie couldn't go because she was at a state of Oklahoma um, inductee ceremony for Hall of
blah
Fame,
dee da.
military Hall of Fame, blah blah blah. So she couldn't go with me, so I had an extra ticket. So Sean's like, "Hey, I'll roll with you." So we're at the Marine Corps Ball, and it occurs to me, hey, I'm in Tulsa. So I text Brian. I'm like, hey, you busy? And he's like, no. And I'm like, you want to come hang out? And he was like, it's late, and I'm going to church tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, that's fair. And then he appropriately chastised me the next day. He was like, you're kind of a dick for not giving me more heads up on that, right? And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's my bad. So sorry,
fair.
Brian.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
What a
okay.
gracious acceptance, Brian.
My
I know, right?
my
Well,
my
Yeah, well,
feelings
yeah,
were
you're right.
hurt, but at the same time, I was kind of like,
he
I
I,
really am tired. I do have church
I
tomorrow.
felt like he didn't want to go out. He wanted he had a good excuse, but he also took the opportunity to like let me like kick Matt in the ding ding while I'm at
I
it.
don't I don't know. I may like I kind of like I'm on the fence. I might have gone. I don't
We'll
know,
never know.
but
We'll
I
never know
accept
because I'm a
Whatever.
dick.
I accept your apology.
Thank you.
If, and
Last night I worked security at ZZ Top.
They're only
are they
one Z now,
alive?
right? It's only a Z top.
There was two dudes. I didn't, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think it is just one Z, and
yeah.
they were doing the moves and the yeah,
Sharp dressed man and
it was cute,
give me all your lovin'. And
right?
did they have the
Legs,
eliminator? Did they pull up in the dope little red car?
no,
No.
weak sauce. I
Gay.
know, right? And, but it is fun to just watch, 60-plus-year-old white ladies dance to rock music, and they were feeling it's a vibe. It is definitely a
ZZ
vibe.
Top is a whole vibe.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
first of all, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And the weekend before that, on Saturday night, I did a Sir Elton John concert.
Okay. That's a different vibe, but also a vibe.
It's a very, 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 very different
That's like
vibe.
the opposite vibe from ZZ
Yeah,
Top.
yeah, same age range, but
Yeah.
yeah, fun though.
Hmm.
Bunch of crazy characters out there.
So, Dre, you had made a comment in our chat that we were going to have the longest intro ever. Was it because of your planned speech, or did you have a lot of other things to bring up?
No, that's the intro.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the
That was
yeah,
your point, was you had a long actual intro to do. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I thought he
I
was
just want
talking about me. Like,
no, I just want to set that up. I want to
all
set up
You
right.
had a lot to set up.
yeah, because I mean, show's over. Melchizedek pops up. He goes away, and that's it, man.
We solved Melchizedek. We
Melchizedek.
we got him to say his name to spell his name
Then
backwards, and now
backwards, that's right.
he can't
He can stop annoying Abraham now.
he can come and menace Superman in another 30 days.
So, so here's all I know of Melchizedek. So for the listeners, Dre brought this up. I think we were talking about it. It came up casually. Dre and Brian mentioned him way back in like episode 20 or something. And I was like, what did you guys say? I'd never heard the name before. So this was all super new to me. I did a little bit of, you know, quick searching and like kind of what's out there. And I learned something completely different that I didn't expect to learn. So I was yesterday old when I learned that Origen, one of the church fathers, was black.
Was he?
He was African.
Well, that doesn't. I mean, he was.
I think Origin was black.
Well,
I think he was in Alexandria, Egypt. So like he was black the way like maybe Cleopatra was black.
Like
or more.
a Ptolemy.
Yeah. But the point is, I didn't realize that both Origin and who was the other one?
Athanasius,
That wasn't the one I was thinking of, but
Clement. I
Clement.
mean,
Clement, yeah.
there's like a whole like
A bunch
you
of those
know
early church fathers were African. I just didn't realize it. And
well
I kind of just fell into that. I was like,
Well, they
huh,
were in Egypt. I don't know for
right.
sure.
Well,
yeah I
and
mean like the Alexandrian church was like a major center of
right.
like Neoplatonic Christianity.
Hmm.
So a bunch of
Um
Greeks, really.
yeah. So
But I like the black theory. I'm gonna go with
I
black.
I I I, I had
Like
no problem
Negro
with it.
black.
I was like,
Like
huh, origin,
Origin run around looking like Morgan Freeman,
right?
talking about Christ.
Yeah,
I've
talking
always
about Melchizedek.
I've always thought of Athanasius as black, even though he probably wasn't. I just like to think of him that way. Don't ask me why. I think it'd be great if Samuel L. Jackson played him in a movie.
I like to think of Athanasius in a tuxedo t-shirt.
It's,
I like to think
he's
of him as like the lead
serious.
singer of like Leonard Skinner with like an angel band.
So, so Dre, I mean, how do we get into this? Like, what set the tone? I mean, you set the
Yeah,
storyboard, right? So this
I-
mysterious dude shows up. He blesses some people, and he freaking deuces out. Like that's pretty much it.
well,
I think some of the implications are that first of all, Abraham's supposed to be the father of the Israelites, right?
Hmm.
So now we have a tradition that perhaps predates Israel, right? So we have the Most High God that's not the right race, that comes from a different place, right? And and has enough authority that a guy like Abraham
And by
would
not the
bow,
right race, you mean not
not
Israelite,
right, correct.
not black, not like we were saying. It's
He's
like,
right, yeah, he's he's the king of Salem, and
right.
a lot of the word means peace, and a lot of
Hmm.
people, well, a lot of scholars believe that Salem was like the suburbs of Jerusalem
Right.
well,
back
Salem
be
Salem was Jerusalem.
well, there you go. Brian
Before
just
before it
confirmed
was called Jerusalem, you're saying it
before
was
David
like
called it
the same
Jerusalem, right?
physical place.
Yeah.
It just
Like that's not a controversial statement. Like that's pretty much agreed upon by scholars that Melchizedek was king of the city that is called Jerusalem. It's called Jerusalem because it was Salem. It was like it's the same name. And
okay.
so
What's this guy's name?
and so but I thought we would start by like well, one, this was requested by a listener, and but it was also something Dre was interested in, and so we're kind of like we're doing it for both of those reasons. But Dre, what's your why were you drawn to this topic? What's your interest here?
Well, my first ever hearing of Melchizedek was way back when I was probably like 10 years old, and it was brought up with the J Dubs. And then later on, I get married a decade plus later, and the Mormons, one of their priesthoods that they bestow on each other is the Melchizedek priesthood. That's the I'm like, oh, who's that? So of course I looked that up, and I'm like, oh, the guy that blessed Abraham, cool. And then I never thought about it again. And then uh, and then the kind of the implications of the no genealogy,
Hmm.
genealogy with no genealogy, because the Bible is super when it comes to priests especially. They're always like, who's your daddy and what does he do, right? And it gives the whole
Hmm.
line of people. And then later on in Hebrews it mentions that there's no father or mother with this Melchizedek. So there's through the times he's been called um the archangel Michael. He's been compared to him. He has been a prototype of Jesus. Some say, like the Gnostics, that he is an incarnation of Jesus. So the Gnostics will say that Jesus has been around through the whole time of man, right? He's
He
been
was popping in and
incarnated.
out and
He's
just
popping
showing
in and
up and
out.
doing stuff.
And then I know that later because of the whole Israelite portion, the Talmud, which is the oral tradition of Jews, they just say, yeah, he was just a dude, not a big deal. It's just he's just king. We
Here's
don't want to make any kind of
here
implications that he might be.
here's my shocked face that
Right.
the rabbinic Jews don't want to give any credence to the type of Melchizedek, right?
And then it's interesting with the reformers because they were bucking the system. Like, well, this guy's got a priesthood and he has no lineage.
Hmm.
They so basically saying, hey, we had the whole Levitical priesthood through basically the Aaronic priesthood, and then we had with the Pope, right, from Peter on, and the reformers are like, well, what about this Melchizedek cat? That's the order that Jesus was, so I guess it doesn't have to be passed down like that. So
Hmm.
it's been sort of it's been used and weaponized to hurt Jews, to say that they're not God's people. It's been used to say, hey, um, church authorities are not church authorities. You have it directly. You have a direct line to God yourself, and it's all done in the name of this Melchizedek guy that blessed Abraham, and he gave him a tenth of all the stuff. And what I kind of left out was, with that blessing, he brought bread and wine. So again, that
He
image,
Melchizedek or Abram?
Melchizedek brought bread and wine to the boys.
Uh-huh.
Um, so so we don't know if it was just for Abraham's men or if it was for him, if it's an early Eucharist, if it's and it's been called all these things like throughout time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The only thing that I saw in my quick little reading, just so I was, functionally literate on the topic, was Origen, one of the church fathers, the aforementioned African. Uh, he seemed to make a big deal out of the fact that what you brought up, Dre, about there being no genealogy, that was a type. It creates a
Right,
type. So he questions, I don't think he questions, but it's a conversation of whether he was a real person or if it was a allegorical conversation to set the stage
right.
for Christ.
And,
Um,
and really it's for so that the priesthood is eternal.
right.
So if there's no father and mother and there's no death, because the Levitical priesthood, there was there was there was like a time limit. How old are you supposed to be before you have to give it up, Brian? Like 50 something? And then you're
Um,
done?
no, I think it's I don't know. I don't know that there is a an upper cap. I think you have to be at least 30 before you start. I'm not
So it's like
entirely
being a
sure.
U.S. senator.
But
Well,
it's
but I don't I think that's well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think
Of course, but it's
my
fun this part.
might I suggest, like, why don't we, like, there are precisely two and a half brief verses about Melchizedek in the Old Testament. And then the writer of he and then most of what people say about Melchizedek, they get from Hebrews 5 through 7. And frankly, I think that they make too much out of it. I like they just I think it comes from a lack of a careful reading of what the writer of Hebrews is actually saying. Um, but
And none of those are my favorite theory.
none of what I just said, or none of
No,
the.
none of all the things that we've described over the last few minutes. My favorite theory is that it's a it's an order of Melchizedek. So it was not a dude, it was a priesthood that was passed down. Um, but because it wasn't passed down necessarily by lineage, you didn't have to be a Levite or whatever tribe. You got passed down because God said that's who you pass it to. So, and it was a combined. So the fact that Melchizedek was a king and a priest, he's also a prophet. So those things are all combined, which when we got to the Levitical priesthood, it gets split off where you have a king and a high priest. And then with Jesus, it combines again, and that's why he's in the order of the Melchizedek priesthood and not the lineage of Judah or Aaron.
Is that your favorite because you believe that to be true, or your favorite because for some other reason?
I think that it could be true. I'm not saying that it is or that it is not, but
Well, okay. So why don't we get into this? Like, since there are so few verses, I think we should get
okay,
into those and kind of
sure.
unpackage what they're saying. So you mentioned Genesis 14 after Abraham or Abram. He wasn't
Right.
Abraham yet. He was Abram. So
And
he
Sarai was the baddie. She wasn't quite Sarah yet.
right. Um, so he defeats the the kings and rescues his nephew from the captives. And where are we? After
And we had
Abram
we had a
returns
whole episode on that,
on
on Abraham and his rescuing his nephew and doing the things. I
that was
was
a
in
long
Utah for it. That's what I remember distinctly.
that was a long time ago. So after Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shava, that is the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, or in Hebrew, El Elyon, which was which is what they called him, El Elyon. He blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "With raised hand I have sworn an oath to Yahweh, God Most High." So he's using Melchizedek's name for God there, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me. Let them have their share. And then in the very next path, the very next chapter, God makes his covenant with Abram, tells him, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. There's some commentators kind of speculate, is he telling him, don't be afraid, Abram, because of these hostilities with these kings. um, but anyway, he promises him the land and that his descendants will number like the stars in heaven. And after he passes through makes the covenant with him by passing through the divided animal parts. On that day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites. Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. So the Amorites being the Canaanites, those are kind of synonyms. And the reason I go through all of that is because I think that like this is I'm not dogmatic on this, but the fact that this figure Melchizedek was there, he was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. So God had at least one chosen one other than Abram in the person of Melchizedek. Um, I've always suspected that like Israel wasn't his first chosen people, but but the land was always supposed to be for his chosen people. Like he had a covenant, and again, this is speculative. But I think I think this episode is highly suggestive of the fact that God had been sort of dealing with the Canaanites. It wasn't the same arrangement as with Israel because there's much said in the Torah about how God hasn't dealt thus with any other nation, but there was some kind of arrangement wherein Melchizedek was chosen to he's ministering to someone as priest, to as a mediator between, that's what a priest is, a mediator between God and man. And so there's something going on there, but I think he's giving them an opportunity to be faithful to whatever the covenant was, because you later on when they come into the promised land, he's like when you read Leviticus, which is where he sets up the Aaronic priesthood. um he lists all these prohibited behaviors and said that the people I'm driving out before you committed all this and they defiled the land, and that's why I'm driving them out. But he tells Abram that his descendants will come back in 400 years because the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. Like he's giving them opportunity to repent, or to give them over to their own devices to see how corrupt they'll become. But he does have Melchizedek at least is righteous before him. Um, and so when by the time you get to Joshua and they come back and the Israelites are conquering the promised land, they come to the same city. It's being called Jebus now. But you might recall when David conquered Jebus, that's when it became Jerusalem. Um, in Joshua chapter 10, when they get to Jebus to conquer it, their king is called Adoni-Zedek, which is
I was going to say that. So according to uh, the book of Jasher, that Noah had all the writings from Adam on, and he took them with him, and the next priest, the righteousness, was his son Shem, who lived in Jerusalem, and perhaps he was this Melchizedek guy. Um,
when you say
and
according to the book of Jasher.
Jasher, yeah, ancient book of Jasher.
We don't have the book of Jasher though.
We don't.
No, doesn't exist. Like we
It's true. I
have.
just I just read it. Like I read portions of it. Like
Yeah, I don't think that's the
and
book of Jasher that's being mentioned.
and Josephus also mentions this stuff in his Antiquities. Um, and there's also Dead Sea Scrolls with with fragments of testaments, such as Noah and Shem and Levi. But
I mean,
when when the
just hang on, just to be clear, for anybody that's listening that's getting confused, we're we're dipping into extra biblical
yeah, yeah, yeah.
text, right?
Yeah,
Like just to be clear, so nothing that
it,
none of
it
this is
Some
necessarily
some of it's also
supported,
in Jubilees, also
right?
yeah,
So
with
none
but
of it's supported by scripture. We're trying to piece together a story with
yeah,
extra biblical text.
and to avoid that complication, Drake, and like let's just for now, let's just stick to what the scripture says and just build out from there. Because I mean, I think that kind of I think it is kind of confusing to kind of like
sure, it's confusing, but I guess my point was is that according to ancient texts in that area, the Amorites beat whoever Melchizedek's people were, and they kept those scripts, and they called themselves Adonai-Zedek, right? Because they saw that and like, oh, we're the people of
well,
righteousness.
the Book of Jashar is a medieval fabrication, like that.
Okay,
That's not an actual an
okay,
ancient book. Now, the Qumran community, there is a lot in the Dead Sea Scrolls that mentions Melchizedek. I don't think we should bring that in yet. I think we should just focus on
okay,
what the
yeah,
Bible. Let's just nail down what the Bible says, and then see how that other stuff fits into it. But the fact that the king of Jebus is called Adoni Zedek makes that's Adoni Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Adoni Zedek just means Lord of righteousness. So it's effectively the same name, which makes me think it's a title. Um, it might have been Melchizedek's actual name, and then his successors took his name as a title, kind of like Julius Caesar. Like Caesar was his family name, and then his successors took that as the title for emperor. Like that kind, it could be that kind of thing.
could
We
be.
don't we don't know though. Like I'm just speculating. I'm just looking at these two passages, Genesis 14 and Joshua 10, and noting that I'm just noticing that the king of Salem slash Jebus is called Melchizedek and or Adonizedek, and there's something to that. I don't know what, and I think those ancient writers that or the the medieval writers who wrote the Book of Jashar, I think they're kind of building on that, but that's sort of, I mean, that was a lot of that's just kind of like fan fiction type stuff. It's not actually it's not reliable information from the time. So you got Genesis 14, you have Joshua 10, and then you have Psalm 110, which Jesus quotes to the Jewish leaders, but Psalm 110 says, Yahweh says to my Adonai, Yahweh says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Yahweh will extend your mighty scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. Your troops will be willing on your day of battle, arrayed in holy splendor. Your young men will come to you like dew from the morning's womb. Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will crush kings on the day of his wrath. He will judge the nations, heaping up the dead and crushing the rulers of the whole earth. He will drink from a brook along the way, and so he will lift his head high. And so this is clearly a messianic psalm, and you have God promising the Messiah that he will be, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. And those two verses, those 2.5 verses are the sole mention of Melchizedek in the Old Testament. Um, but really, the more important issue than just exploring who Melchizedek was, I think it's understanding what a priest was, and I think kind of exploring that makes a lot more sense out of Hebrews. Um, there's probably more about Melchizedek in Hebrews from him explaining the the juxtaposition between the priesthood of Melchizedek and the priesthood of Aaron than there is in the actual Old Testament that he's citing. But this is largely because of the he's elaborating on the role of priests, and how Jesus is a better priest than Jesus's priesthood is a better priesthood than that of the Levites. And so um what do you guys think so far?
Well, I want to back up. So back to the Genesis account, and we've touched on this briefly, but I think there's a couple of naming conventions at play that are relevant. And I don't know what they are, so I'm going to pose this as a genuine question, but I think there's something here. So I know, but just for conversational purposes, the individuals that were participating, right, was Abram, not Abraham, right? So there's relevance there to the name difference, right? The fact that his name changed from Abram to Abraham, there's a meaning behind that. But I'm also interested, or I think it's worth talking about, and I don't remember. I think Brian, you referenced it, or Dre did also, that Melchizedek was a priest of Elion, right? That there was differences between the cultural or the geographical or the racial makeup of who referred to God as Yahweh versus El Elyon. Like what's going on there?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's God also, he appears to Moses and tells him, to Abraham, I revealed myself as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh, I did not make myself known to him.
Right.
Yet here you have Abram obviously calling him Yahweh.
Mhm.
This isn't exactly your question, but it overlaps with it. Like that, there were you have all these different titles applied to God. El Elyon, God Most High; El Shaddai, God, often translated God Almighty; um, Elohim. Um, Ugaritic texts that have been discovered in the past 100 years reveal that they worship that El Shaddai was a god that was worshipped by the Canaanites within their pantheon. Um, Clearly, God didn't see himself as part of that pantheon. He condemned the the gods of the Canaanites and their worship. Um, but yeah, there's actually even if you expand the scope a bit to other countries, there's good evidence that people worshipped Yahweh outside of Israel, outside of the biblical peoples. Um, but then they fell into idolatry and polytheism. But I'm not sure if that's your
Well,
question
I guess
or
what I'm getting at is in some of the, you know, different corners of the internet, if a person was out Googling and trying to learn and reading and, I think nipping at the corners of the DCW, right? It kind of leads people, like with this conversation, to start looking at extra biblical things, and then you start falling into some weird theoretical rabbit holes, right? I've seen a lot of ideas that there was a stacking of different gods in a pantheon. And basically it suggests that El and El Elyon and Elohim and Yahweh were different entities rather than being different names for the same entity. Um, and I remember reading something by Heiser where he talks about that, and he referred to them as like there's like the five names of God or something like that, or four, maybe it was four primary names for God, and that he kind of linked them to geographies and civilizations. Am I misremembering that? Is that sounding familiar to either of you two?
um
That
I'm not
that
I'm
basically
not familiar with that.
there's like the El Elyon people, and then there's the Yahweh, the Yahwists or whatever.
Well, I think you might be thinking of the documentary hypothesis,
Might
which
be.
says that there are multiple traditions that were kind of combined to form the biblical narrative. There's the Deuteronomist and the Yahwist and the priestly uh, source and the Elohist source.
Yeah,
And I
that
think,
might be it. That might be kind of where I'm pulling that from.
yeah. But yeah, like as far as are they different entities or are they different names for the same God? Like I think that's yeah, if you read ancient Canaanite literature and the stories that they tell about El Shaddai and his consort Asherah, and then there's Baal Hadad comes in, and yeah, the stories they're telling are clearly not about the God of Israel.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think even the word, there's I think this is a limitation of human language that when God reveals himself to mortals, he has to use language they're going to understand.
Yeah.
And so when it says that, and by the way, when he told Moses, I revealed myself to Abraham as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh, I did not make myself known to him. He isn't talking about the label of Yahweh. There's a theological point being made. And this is kind of, it's not directly related to Melchizedek, but it sort of, it kind of speaks to the minimalist scholars, non-believing scholars, basically are they see the Bible as purely a man-made product, not a the product of revelation from God.
Hmm.
And so, in accounting for its origins, they offer the documentary hypothesis, and they look at things like Exodus 6, where God tells Moses, by my name, I revealed myself to Abram as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh, I did not make myself known. They see that as a contradiction with Genesis, where Abraham is clearly calling him by the name Yahweh. So they attribute that to different sources being spliced together. But if you don't read it with that mindset, if you read it with the understanding that it's revelation and ask the question, well, what does it mean for him to reveal himself as Yahweh? You do find this phrase repeated throughout the prophets. It shows up like 50 times in Ezekiel, where God says that like something is going to come to pass as according to his will in the future, and then you will know that I am Yahweh, and then you and that phrase, and then you will know I am Yahweh, gets repeated after each one. Or
And then you will know
Yeah.
I am
I
the
thought the exact
Lord.
same thing. Yeah.
yeah, but there's something about the fulfillment of prophecy in history that that is tied to knowing him as Yahweh, revealing like So Abraham, were you going to say something, Dre?
No, I'm just saying in time, whenever something gets fulfilled, there's a dude on the couch drinking a beer. I saw that. I saw
The
that's
the the
this
Leonardo DiCaprio
Leonardo
meme,
DiCaprio.
right?
That's the prophets every time something's fulfilled.
Gotcha. So when he says that to Moses, and this is in the midst of him saying, "Now is the time to fulfill what was promised to Abraham," that's what it means that he's revealing himself as Yahweh. And so but anyway, that's just an aside. But
A
as
real quick note.
Mhm.
According to Numbers 8, 24 and 25, your Levitical priesthood starts at 25 and it's capped at 50.
Oh, it
You
is.
retire.
You only
You
get
okay,
retire.
25 years in the priesthood.
Right.
Okay.
um,
And you better have the right lineage.
Right.
yeah, and so I think we ought to get into Hebrews and just kind of look at what it actually says and what it doesn't. So um, the thesis of Hebrews is that he's basically making the case to as the name implies, he's writing to Hebrews, to Hebrew people who are apparently abandoning Christianity and going back to Judaism under threat of persecution, cultural pressure,
Persecution by whom? The Pharisees?
probably Jews in their community, non-Christian Jews in their community, maybe Romans. The Romans, like the Jews were the Romans had a deep respect for established tradition, and so like they tended to make concessions to long-standing customs of the people that they conquered, which is why like you read about this in the Gospels where they took the bodies down before sundown because it was a Sabbath. Normally, they leave the bodies on the crosses to rot indefinitely and just
Hmm.
let like scavengers carry off the parts. That's part that like denying them a proper burial is part of the humiliation and part of the punishment of crucifixion. In in Judea, they let them bury them before sundown in deference to their customs.
But
Um,
was it in deference to their customs to be respectful, or was it to keep from having a full-on revolt?
That's what I was going to say.
either one.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
like,
but intent matters. I mean, like
well, but just for the purposes of the point I'm making,
it doesn't
like
matter.
I
Okay.
was just using that as an
Sure.
example to
Okay.
kind of explain. But Christianity was seen, as long as Christianity was seen as a sect of Judaism, it was somewhat protected from some persecution from the Romans. But if there's tensions between Jews and Christians in an area wherein it becomes apparent to the Romans that this
The
is
Romans choose the Jews.
Yeah, because it's
yeah,
the
like
greater
If
number,
you,
right? It's like
yeah,
it's yeah, from
well,
a
they respect Judaism because it's traditional and established, but Christianity, as distinct from Judaism, is seen as something new, and so they don't have the same level of respect for it. So, in answer to your question about who was persecuting them, Jews and
yes.
Romans probably. And so it would have worked out that way based on the cultural pressures. But so they are, you know, people are under pressure to abandon Christianity and go back to Judaism. And the point of this, it's really kind of a sermon in written form. The point of the sermon is to explain to them that, well, this actually is Judaism. Like that's like this is what that's building toward. That system is obsolete, and going back to the Old Testament, going back to the Torah itself, according to the terms established within the Jewish scriptures, the Jewish system as they knew it was obsolete. It was only there to point the way to Jesus and the by the and he points to the fact that one in the limitations of the Levitical priesthood that are just inherent to it are enough to show that it's not effective, it's not long term, it's inadequate to deal with their sins. And the purpose of it, and just to kind of like get into the idea of, and I think a lot of the stuff that he says about Melchizedek is somewhat inscrutable to us because we don't come into it with the foundation that they had. Um, like understanding what a priest was. Like in Genesis 1 and 2, like if you when you unpackage all of the ancient Near Eastern language there, what becomes clear and obvious is that Adam was the purpose of Adam was to be a priest, was to be a representative of God on earth, and the Garden of Eden was a proto temple. Like that's what the temple is based on. Like the architecture of the tabernacle, it was supposed to be a recreation of the Garden of Eden. Um, like the cherubim on the mercy seat, that's evocative of the cherubim guarding the way to the tree of life with the flaming sword. Um, the language of Genesis 2,
Well, and it
it's
checks out just from the fact that God literally walked around in the garden, right? Like the idea of the
yeah,
temple is that God is there and he was actually in Eden.
yes. That's the main thing. But it's orientated so that you enter on the east and you go toward the west. They were exiled to the east of Eden, and they were probably treating the Garden of Eden itself as sort of a temple. Like Cain and Abel were making offerings outside of the entrance, probably. But I mean, there's all kinds of features I could go into to explain how the tabernacle is an architectural recreation of the Garden of Eden. But just take my word for it that it is. And the point of it is to like for Israel to kind of be the new Adam through which God makes himself known to the world. But for that to work, you have to you have to have this ongoing recreation of the Garden of Eden where God dwells in the presence of where man dwells in the presence of God and God in the presence of man. And that's the whole point of the sacrificial system. And it establishes quite clearly that like God is life. But humans are corrupt by our sin. We're kind of like the Walking Dead. We're like humans compared to what we were supposed to be, or we're kind of like zombies. We're kind of like these undead creatures who, compared to what we were supposed to be, such corruption can't exist in the presence of life. Something has to die for you to get into the presence of God without dying yourself. And this is just a recurring emphatic point in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus itself, and the whole temple system was to drive this point home. There is no coming in the presence of God without death, um, because He's life and we're corrupt. If that makes sense. Um, but the fact that it had to keep like to maintain this relationship with God, they had to keep offering animal sacrifices day in and day out and do the Day of Atonement once a year in order for the priest to go into the presence of God. And in doing so, he was representative of the people. So they were kind of vicariously in God's presence too. Um, this was a system that was kind of always like it's sort of like it was always kind of like set up to be to fail, to not be adequate to its to any final accomplishment of that purpose. And this is and the writer of Hebrews makes this case from the Levitical system and from the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah said that, where God, through Jeremiah, God explicitly said, the days are coming when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors in the wilderness, which they broke, though I was a husband to them. Instead, I will write my laws on their hearts, I will write my word on their minds. And no longer will a man teach his neighbor, saying, Know the Lord, for they will all know me from the least of them to the greatest. The point is, he's going to give them a new nature so that the righteousness of God is not in an external code, but in their very being. Um, and he points to that to establish that there's a new covenant should should be expected, but also in this messianic psalm where God makes promises to the Messiah and he swears you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Well, that establishes a change of priesthood, which you would expect with a change of covenant. And so the whole point of it is that the system that they were going back to was always only ever going to come to an end when something better came along with the Messiah. And so like that's the main point there. His point is not to sing the greatness of Melchizedek. He's really only using Melchizedek insofar as the psalmist was to say that his priesthood will be like that of Melchizedek.
But
Um,
okay. So like that of Melchizedek. So clearly the Melchizedek priesthood was before the Levitical priesthood, and we're going back to that because there was a reason to go to the Levitical priesthood.
well, well, let's look at the specific things that the writer says, because he's not saying it's like Melchizedek in a general sense. He makes very specific observations about it. So, do you want to look at those?
An older tradition.
Uh, so, what are you asking?
I don't know. Just so let's go on. What's Hebrews say?
Okay. Um, So, let's see. Every high priest is selected from among the people and is appointed to represent the people in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. This is chapter 5, by the way. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. This is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins as well as for the sins of the people. And no one takes this honor on himself, but he receives it when he is called by God, just as Aaron was. In the same way, Christ did not take on himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, You are my son. Today I have become your father. That's from Psalm 2. And he says in another place, You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And so he goes on to, he says more about Jesus, but then he has to pause.
Hold on. Hold on. What verse is that where he says, "You were my son"?
Um,
Because it sounds like what he says in Matthew and Mark after he gets baptized.
well, he's quoting Psalm 2, which is it's I will proclaim the decree of Yahweh. He has said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your treasure possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter and dash them to pieces like
Okay,
pottery.
got it.
This is it's about the it's it's primarily about the dynasty of David, which is like the another major messianic prophecy when God spoke to him through Nathan and told him that it's not for you to build my house, rather I will be the one to build your house, but a son from your own body will be the one to build my temple. But there's actually a lot going on there that's relevant to this, but it's kind of we it's not directly relevant. But anyway, does that answer your question about
Sure.
um, and he says in another place, you were a priest forever. And this is in Hebrews 5, by the way. And then he has to pause to kind of lay into him for being so lazy and slow to learn and apathetic. But then he picks it up again in the late chapter 6, when God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. People swear by someone.
Hang on a second. That's like looking around, you're like, who's in charge here? Shit, I am. Okay, in my name, I'm telling you that. That's a really funny concept.
Okay.
You don't find that like interesting? Like it's like being, who's the most senior Marine around here? Oh, damn it, it's me. Right? Like he's like,
All right, all right, Sentinel Ben.
oh, I'm the grown up. Shit, I'm the grown up in the room. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's amusing. My head's in a different place right now. I was sorry.
No, it's fine.
Um,
But hang on, go back. So whenever I agree with you, and I think it's important to, this is the way Jesus specifically did this, like throughout all of his talk, all of his sermons, right? Like it seemed to be the way they did things back then is they didn't reference verses the way we reference them. They would throw out five words in a string, and then there would be an expectation that you would know that those five words is
yeah,
talking about this psalm or that verse in Leviticus or Genesis, right?
sure.
But when they do that, they're pointing to the broader portion in that older text, right?
Yeah, there are no verses in the Bible, as Frank Turek likes
Right.
to say. And I
So just now when you were reading that and you're saying he referenced Psalm 2 first, but when he references Psalm 110, what's the intent there? Because you expanded on the Psalm 2, but you didn't expand on the 110.
well,
So
Psalm 110 is the one is
it's the Melchizedek quote. I mean, it's a Melchizedek
Right.
reference about the
well, but it's
priesthood.
also the psalm that Jesus quotes
Right.
when he's in Jerusalem and everyone's they're grilling him with questions, and
Hmm.
then finally he asks them a question. Tell me about the Messiah. Whose son is he? And
Hmm.
they say, well, he's David's son. And then he quotes, well, then explain to
Then
me how,
David
David
called him
himself,
Lord.
speaking by the Spirit, says, Yahweh says to my Lord, you sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And
Hmm.
then, so Psalm 110 is basically God making promises to the Messiah. Um, and there's this is a very cool song. Like we could like spend all day unpackaging this, but the promises that he makes are sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Paul quotes that in 1 Corinthians 15 to talk about how like all how the divine the powers of the divine council are being defeated
Hmm.
um, while Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. Yahweh will extend your mighty scepter from Zion, saying, "Rule in the midst of your enemies." That could be referencing Jesus at the right hand of the Father in the midst of the divine council as he's stripping them of power. It also seems to picture him on earth, overcoming rebellious nations.
Hmm. The
Your troop,
easy softball would be it's, being in Israel while it's surrounded by aggressive militant Muslim people trying to kill Israel, right? Like you could make that.
I think those will be out of the way before
Well, I'm
before
just
he
saying
gets
you could
back.
make
But
that leap using that language.
maybe. But he says, your troops will be willing on your day of battle, arrayed in holy splendor. Young men will come to you like to do. The Septuagint has a more sensible reading of that. I wish I had my Septuagint here. My bad. And then it says, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the
Mhm.
order of Melchizedek. Um, and then the Lord is at your. So it's interesting that this, you know, God swearing this oath to him that he'll be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. It's sandwiched in between all of this war language about
That's
him
why I was bringing it up
destroying his
because
enemies.
it's one of those things where it probably matters if it was worth quoting, right?
Yeah. But so the writer of Hebrews, he elaborates on how exactly Jesus is like Melchizedek. And I
Hmm.
think that's worth looking at. So we're not just kind of speculating. Yeah, so we were remarking on how the psalm itself, it's God making promises to the Messiah, and it's all kinds of warlike language about how he's going to make his enemies footstools for his feet. He's going to rule in the midst of his enemies. Young men will come to him willing on the day of battle. He's going to crush his enemies. Sandwiched in between that, it says Yahweh has sworn, and and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So it's interesting that this is whatever that means in that context. It has something to do with the Messiah conquering his enemies. And so, which is interesting considering how like the cross, like it talks about how he triumphed over the principalities and powers by the cross. He put them to shame. He stripped them of power. Um, so all of this warlike language that we're reading about, if we read that within a divine council worldview context, I mean, I think it has double meaning. I think it applies to the divine council being stripped of power through the cross, but also ruling on earth. That's a clear expectation of the Messiah in this in Psalm 110 and elsewhere. But yeah, so the writer of Hebrews cites that to say that Jesus is like Melchizedek, and then but he's not like him in a general sense. He's like him in very specific senses, which he explains in chapter 7. He says, this Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First, the name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Now, I don't think he's saying that Melchizedek is an eternal being. He's, as Dre's already pointed out, his his being a priest was not predicated on his lineage. So it's not that he didn't have a mother and father. It's that that wasn't relevant to the fact that
It
he's a
was
priest.
purposefully mute on that topic
Right.
versus presenting it to justify the hows and the whys.
Right. Which is particularly significant in the book of Genesis, which is packed with genealogies.
Right.
And a lot of these genealogies are in service to
To set up the activities that are going to
And I
come.
and I, I think that's why all these theologies lost their mind and just came up with
They had to do something with this information because they were
right,
like, what do we do with this?
right,
Well, and a lot of the genealogies in Genesis, they are specifically in service to the role of Adam and his descendants as priests. Um, like it was a role that was lost with the exile from Eden, but it was like the purpose of the narrative is to point toward its restoration. And so you've got this like in Genesis 5, the genealogy of Seth from Adam going to Noah. Noah is this kind of there's this expectation set up that Noah means rest because he's going to give us comfort from our labors. Also, the Sabbath rest was the seventh day was made sacred because it's the day that God rested. And that's temple language. And so it like the temple language, the priesthood of Adam in the garden, this is all kind of tied together. Noah, his name meaning rest, is evocative of that. And then the ark, it was essentially a temple in itself. Like it's a microcosm of creation, which is what temples are. It's one of the ark, the tabernacle, and the temple are like the only structures in the Old Testament where you get the exact dimensions of them, um, which
right.
reinforces that the ark was a temple, which would make Noah a sort of priest. So anyway, that the focus on genealogies is meaningful within that context. So that's why that's there. It's not to tell us that Melchizedek is an eternal being. It's that it's not tied to his genealogy. So he resembles the Son of God in that regard, but he is not the Son of God. He is not a pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. Um, just think of how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the plunder. Now the law requires the descendants of Levi to become priests to collect a tenth from the people. So Levi tithed while he was still in the body. So that proves Melchizedek's greatness. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed the law given to the people established that priesthood, why was there still need for another priest to come, one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? Um, well, I'll make that point later on. Uh, I was going to say something, but changed my mind. For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed also. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. So this is more about how it's not based on his genealogy. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. For it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Um, and so, because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantor of a better covenant. And so now there have been many of those priests as death prevented them from continuing in office, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him. Um, so I think that's pretty much the end of what it says about Melchizedek. But the comment he resembles the Son of God, but is not the Son of God. The commonality is in his priesthood on the basis of the power of an indestructible life, not on the basis of his genealogy. So there was something about Melchizedek that made him personally merit the priesthood. Um, it doesn't elaborate on what that is, but
It's like
but
what's the modern thing? Melchizedek appears, blesses Abram, Abram tithes him. Melchizedek refuses to elaborate further and he disappears.
He gone.
Yeah. It it it, it it's it's also
You
interesting to when you're talking about, the type, the typology that's, you know, the Adam was the first, right? Type. And then we have multiples, Melchizedek potentially being another type. Um, it's I don't know, it's strange. It's a weird thing to wrap one's head around, to say how many, why so many, how so many, this constant occurrence. It feels, I guess the correct answer is it's prophetic, but it feels literary, right? It feels like if, an author was trying to set up a sequel of movies or books and then sprinkling these ideas about the final act, right? And then you see it and you're like, oh, the sixth sense. Oh, crap, it was always there in front of me the whole time. I just didn't notice it, kind of thing.
like you're saying, it seems more like storytelling than history.
Well, it does, yeah. But I mean, obviously, there's an the easy, or the obvious interpretation is it was there purposefully so that you had these in flesh examples to make it easier to understand it when it finally happens, because God was attempting to set up something that made sense, and it was traced back, and it wasn't just out of nowhere kind of thing. Um, but where we have a lot of things that are in the Bible that are, meant to be genuinely historical, and then there isn't, right? Then that begs a question: was Melchizedek an actual historical figure, or was his existence here simply something to create further conversation around?
Well, yeah, I think he was a historical figure, but to your larger observation about how it seems more like storytelling than history. Like I kind of my my own reading of history after the Bible, like you kind of see the same
I
motifs play out.
I agree.
Like uh like one big example is um the temple was destroyed 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. Um, Nobody in the New Testament remarks on that. No, like none of the like the early church fathers will like they mention the destruction of the temple. They mention that it was because they rejected Jesus. Nobody points out that the number 40 fits so well there, which the number 40, of course, is a recurring.
You think they're too close to it?
Maybe, yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it.
Because they didn't have
But
the opportunity of 2,000 years to go, wait a
yeah,
minute, look at the way these numbers are.
Right,
but
with 2000 years of tradition and more telling and
Yeah.
and there's another motif that like the idea that the Messiah is Israel. Like in Matthew's gospel, he quotes he when they go live in Egypt to escape Herod, and then Herod dies, and they come back. And then Matthew writes, "This happened so that it would fulfill the prophecy: Out of Egypt I called my son." Well, he's quoting Hosea. Hosea in that prophecy, it's not really a prophecy at all. It's a reference to the Israel coming out of Egypt in the Exodus. Yet Matthew is using this as a prophecy about the Messiah. Well, I'm not saying that it's not a prophecy. I'm saying that reading it's not presented as a prediction of future events. It's a look back on
Yeah.
the
No, I get,
Exodus.
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
no, I get it.
They've been
And
accepted.
there's another major example where like when Jesus rises from the dead and he meets the two on the road to Emmaus, and then he goes to the scriptures and explains to them how the scriptures um, predict that the Messiah would have to suffer and then rise again on the third day. And he opened their minds about all the things the scripture said about himself. Well, you can scour the Old Testament, and there is not a single individual verse that says that the Messiah is going to die and on the third day be raised. But there is a prophecy in Hosea about Israel being punished by God and torn to pieces by God and injured by God and because of their sin, and then they repent, and then it says that they will, and then on the third day he will raise us. Um, like that's the most explicit reference to a third day resurrection in the entire Bible prior to Jesus, but it's about Israel, which is not a contradiction. That's what being the Messiah means, that you are the embodiment of Israel. He is the fulfillment of all of God's purposes for Israel. And it's kind of like if you ever watch the Ten Commandments, where Pharaoh says, "I am Egypt." Like the
Hmm.
king is the embodiment of his people. That's
Hmm.
that's a very common idea, and especially so the Messiah. And so the Messiah, and you also kind of get this from Paul when he talks about how he was a according to the flesh he was descended from David, but he was declared but by the Holy Spirit with power to be the Son of God. I'm butchering the the
It's fine.
the sentence here, but he says declared to be the Son of God by the resurrection from the dead. The wording is weird there. This is in Romans, like the opening verses. He doesn't say by his resurrection from the dead. He's referencing the resurrection from the dead. Like Jesus' resurrection is a preview of the eschaton it's a preview of Israel's resurrection, which will be humanity's resurrection. And like all of that is to say that like these patterns that Israel went through and that are prophesied for Israel, these are as much messianic prophecies as any of the explicit messianic prophecies. Um, so with all that in mind, and by the way, like when I was in the Marine Corps, like my last year in the Marine Corps, when God told me to go to Israel when I got out. I just woke up one morning with this thought in my head and it was a thought that was having me. It wasn't like a thought that I had. Like it was so big and concrete. And I just woke up with it, just marveling at this. But it basically, I woke up with this realization that Israel, that the Jews as a people were collectively, figuratively crucified in the Holocaust. And then in the third year, raised from the dead when with the reformation of the state of Israel. Um, like so those are two examples of these sort of literary motifs playing out in history outside of the Bible, where there's no human author coming up with this stuff to force a pattern. It happens that way in history. And there's all kinds of stuff in church history that you can also point to. I think the rise of Islam is if you were reading church history in the Bible, like if there was a book of the Bible that told the history of the church and talked about the sins of the church in seizing political power and giving into the temptation that Jesus resisted of bowing down to the devil and taking control by force, the rise of Islam is exactly the kind of punishment that you would expect to be visited upon the church according to those literary patterns. But anyway, this is kind of it's kind of off topic from Melchizedek, but to address your your quite valid and understandable and shared observation that it sometimes reads more like storytelling than history. Well, history often reads like storytelling. So,
Yeah,
but
no, that's fair. Yeah, it's just it just strikes me as interesting that way, that the way some of this is presented. That's a fair point also. Dre, what are you thinking?
I we yeah.
You had brought up a thing that you had mentioned earlier when you were starting to branch off into the extra biblical stuff, and then Brian wanted to carry out the biblical portion first. What was you had mentioned your favorite
So it
Melchizedek
does
lore?
it is interesting to me that the at the there's the sons of Zadok and people from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and a lot of people think that those Essenes and part of that when their leaders was John the Baptist. And if John the Baptist perhaps was a priest in this Zadok priesthood, when he baptized Jesus, that was him passing that portion of this Melchizedek priesthood onto him. And if you just kind of run that back from Adam, that there was always a priest. So that's what these extra
Hmm.
biblical
I,
things are
I,
saying.
I'm not gonna lie. I like that just because it's a lot more simple answer as to why was Jesus baptized than the
Right.
longer
And
version.
the point that the dove came down and God saying, "This is my son, and I'm well pleased."
Right.
That was the portion of the priesthood being bestowed upon him because he was already going to be the king.
It was the final
So
passing of that
it
torch
was
that had
all the
been
so then in Hebrews when it says that there's no ending in this Melchizedek priesthood because there's no ending of Jesus. So there's
right.
no need to pass it down again.
Right. That was the last time that
Jesus is the last Melchizedek
this
priest.
uncomfortable piece of
well,
metal.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
well, to answer that, the writer of Hebrews makes it clear that like Jesus was perfected for the priesthood through the cross. Like it wasn't bestowed on him by John the Baptist or even at his baptism. Him becoming a priest was accomplished through his death.
Well, it could have been but it could have been that his the forever part was because of the cross, right? The fact that
Well,
he carried that priesthood to the cross and then was resurrected that could have been the predestination part of the resurrection of the crucifixion and the resurrection.
let me read what it actually says, so that we're not speculating. Bear with me here. Um, and by the way, I don't think that there is a Melchizedekian priesthood order. Like
Of
I
course
don't
you
think
don't,
that I
because
don't think
because it doesn't say that. Like, of course you don't. Why would you?
well, it like it the way that these sources that you're referencing talk about it, and the way the Mormons talk about it, makes it sound like there is a priesthood, like wherein like it's an institution
Wait, why? But
known
why?
as the
Hang on,
Melchizedekian
But
Brian.
what? But
priesthood.
Hang
why
on.
isn't it?
Yeah, why would you say it isn't when that's what Psalm 110 says?
I'm explaining that.
Okay.
That's exactly
Okay,
what I'm getting to right
okay,
now.
but when it's in like 8 words in black and white, you'd have to
Okay.
make some pretty big leaps to not
You
take that at what
you
it
are a
says.
priest according to the order of Melchizedek.
Right.
According to the order of doesn't mean that there is an order of a bunch of priests who are all Melchizedekian priesthoods. It means you're a priest in the likeness of, that you are after the pattern of.
So do you think there's a bunch of Melchizedek priests according to these sources that I'm talking about? I'm not talking Mormons.
Um, I don't know. I'm just like I'm
There's
basing
not.
this
So
on.
it's passed down specifically. So when you it goes from Adam, but then it skips Seth and goes to Canaan, and it has to do with kind of the apostasy that goes on the earth in Canaan's time.
Well,
And
but
then
that's exactly the point that I'm rebutting. There is
okay.
not this long um line of Melchizedekian priests. Maybe you
So
could
you don't
argue
think
in a
you don't think
sense.
that Shem could be Melchizedek?
No.
Okay.
Um, I think Melchizedek was Melchizedek. I mean, that like the only thing we get from the scriptures, like the only comparison, and I kind of think that if Melchizedek was just one in a long line of holders of this priesthood, I think that seems like a pretty important point to mention. Like it wouldn't be something we would have to reconstruct. It the comparison is between Melchizedek and Jesus, period. And this is only because, well, and it's also left a huge part out. Being a king and a priest was also a,
Forbidden thing. It was
well,
you got
it was an uncommon thing.
well, guys
Um,
tried to do it, and
you
what
had a
was it?
lot of that in pagan religion, but you didn't have that
Right.
in within like priesthood of a priesthood of the one true God. And in the prophet Zechariah, there's a prophecy about um, he tells the prophet to go to the house of it's really cool, and I want to get it right, so bear with me for a
Well,
second.
while you're looking that up, Brian, I want to go back to Dre's question. I don't have a dog in the fight, by the way. I'm just curious. Dre asked, "Do you not think it's possible that Shem was Melchizedek?" And you said no. So to say no to that, you would have to have concrete evidence to say it's not possible. He didn't say it was. The
Um,
question, is it possible, is very different, right?
well, I think that if we were meant to think that, it would say that somewhere. It wouldn't be left for us to like it. It's a one-to-one comparison between Jesus and Melchizedek. There are that he is like Melchizedek in certain ways, but if we were meant to think that this was a and really the main point of the Epistle of Hebrews is that like Jesus's priesthood is forever. He isn't he's a priest according to the pattern of Melchizedek in certain respects, which the writer of Hebrews talks about. Um, to say that, but it also establishes that he is this priest specifically because of the cross. Let me read this part so that it's better if I just instead of trying to reason it out to just get it from um, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus becoming high priest in the order of Melchizedek was predicated on him dying, him submitting to death. The idea that this was a role that had just been inhabited by all kinds of people before him that that was being passed down generationally, and he was the latest holder of it. Well,
But,
that doesn't make sense
well,
within
it
the
was a role that was halted at Levi and then picked back up with Jesus. Like it went from who was it?
well,
Uh
but my point is, what was that role? Like what did the Melchizedekian priesthood do in this formulation?
he was the priest of the God Most High and king of all the people. That was Adam. He had dominion over the earth. So Adam was the king, king of all the peoples, and also the priests.
Okay. Um, what about Shem and the rest?
Uh, Same.
Well, I mean, but there's no mention of Shem being the ruler of everybody, or of having he
Well, that's
was
because there were also the lands were split, right? DCW. So Shem was the king of God's people.
well, that wasn't till much later when they built the Tower of Babel. Like that was after they had repopulated the earth. Um, I mean, but like it
Was it,
just
what what?
like it
Until
if
they
the
repopulated the earth,
Melchizedek
was Nimrod before Abraham or not?
he was before Abraham.
Okay, well, this is what I'm talking about. Shem was around with Abraham. He was at Sarah's
So
funeral, and it's
let's
kind
just
of a big deal.
let's just say for the sake of argument that you're right. Why is it important to to believe this or to have this information?
You know, that's what I've been mulling over. In fact, just 15 minutes ago, I was like, this actually doesn't matter. So,
Yeah,
but it's fun, right? Like but
yeah, but like
it doesn't matter. Jesus' priesthood is superior to the Aaronic priesthood. Thank you. Please drive through. That'd be
um
249 at the first window. You're on mute, Matt.
That's how I came into this conversation is I didn't
Right.
feel like there was something that was like going to change the face of Christendom that we were
No,
going
me
to
either.
uncover
Yeah,
on this, right? It was more of just a, hey, this is a weird thing in the Bible. Let's dig in and see what, what it could be. And we could, and Brian, that's specifically why I kind of went at your response about, yeah, there's no way it's possible it's him. And I'm like, well, why not? And I appreciate what you just said. Like, okay, if it was, what does that matter? And Dre's like, well, I guess it doesn't. Like,
right. Yeah.
so that was my kind of point
Well,
was is
but it was but on the other end, it's weaponized, right? It's why
by
kings in the
whom?
Middle Age, but by kings in the Middle Ages, by saying, hey, no, you can be king without you. In fact, we can have it as birthright, or I can pass it down to whoever I want to, and I can flip the bird to the Pope because I'm part of the Melchizedek priesthood
Oh,
and
and they
not
could just
part
well,
of
pop it out because there's no
right,
lineage, and all you
right.
had to do is just
and
claim it. I
And
see.
God told me I'm the king,
That's
which
interesting.
is why now guess what? I we have the Church of England. F you.
and the
That's
irony
interesting.
there is that like he's actually you don't need Melchizedek for that. The fact of Jesus's serving as a priest in the order of Melchizedek forever actually makes every Christian a priest. Like the whole point of it, like when Jesus died, like just to kind of complete the picture here, and the writer of Hebrews makes a does he mention the curtain being torn in
Hey,
two in
hang on, Brian.
Hebrews?
Can I jump in real quick? I've
Okay.
been looking at this. The reason I was on mute, when I go on mute, guys, it's because I'm typing and my keyboard's hella loud. So I mute it before I start typing, so I'm not causing background noise. But I wanted to go do the scholarly nerd thing to check Brian when he was saying that where it says the order of Melchizedek doesn't mean like a priestly order.
Yeah.
So the just Brian's right, by the way. I'll start with that. I won't bury the lead. The the Hebrew word is dibra, and it means basically the cause, the estate, But that's kind of the King James version. But according to Strong's, it's a reason, suit, or style. So in the style of Melchizedek, in the
Well,
appearance of Melchizedek is what
He
Strong's says, right?
he's dressed as dope. Is that what
Yeah, yeah.
he has a cane? I don't know.
But I mean, but I think that's probably really important because a lot of the idea of the order of Melchizedek, like this is like, by the way, I'm kind of bringing this up as an homage to Doc Heiser, right? Like this is something that he would jump on. He's like, well, all of these theories are predicated on a bad interpretation of the original word that was written.
yeah.
And if you go back and kind of get grounded on the actual words and what the words mean, right? Do a little hermeneutics in here and like figure out where our starting position is, it could help curtail some of the craziness.
Yeah. To be fair, though, the Greek word is tachys. It's where we get the word you know, taxonomy. It's
Hmm.
um, the same word is used of the Levitical priesthood. Um,
So hang on. So you're
like
saying the Septuagint and the Masoretic are at odds for which words being used?
no,
That because that'd be even more fascinating.
I'm talking about in the New Testament in the
Right.
book of Hebrews.
Right.
The Greek word, the same Greek word tachys is
Hmm.
used for the Levitical priesthood and the priesthood according to the tachys of Melchizedek.
Right.
So like
So
you like you can't get that from a
interesting.
you can't get that Melchizedek was a priesthood of one
Hmm. From
just
the
from
word
that word
tackies.
study.
Right.
Um,
Interesting.
but I think that's true on other grounds, mostly for the fact that like it's never called a priesthood in the order of Shem or a priesthood in the order of it's like Melchizedek.
Is
No,
that
because
later?
Shem is a end of the order of Melchizedek.
Well, hang on, but
Well,
I'm just saying, is that a later language style to say that? Is that what you're getting at?
well,
That ancient Near Easterners didn't use that kind of language to say the order of this or the order of that?
well, like I think that our modern use of like if there's an order of monks, for
Hmm.
instance, it's not going to be one monk. I mean, an order of monks means there's a bunch of them and they're all there in the monastery together doing
Right.
their monkish orderly stuff. Um, I think that language, and I don't know this. I haven't I did that one word study, but I suspect that came from the use of, the priestly order of Leviticus. But anyway, I don't know. Like I don't. I'm just
But
saying from the text itself, you can't get that there is an order of Melchizedek in the sense that of plural.
it, it,
It just means according to the pattern of, and so.
so Melchizedek, just if you just
But
break out his name, so like, so he was the king of righteousness of Salem,
um,
because that's what Melchizedek means, king of righteousness. That's what it
sure,
means. So
yeah.
he was the king of righteousness. So some parent, you know what your name is? I'm gonna name you the king of righteousness. It's kind of like, a lot of like hood parents, like, I'm gonna name you king or precious or
So, Dre, what you're getting at is
champion,
he was renamed after he became king, but that
perhaps.
probably
Yeah,
wasn't his birth
yes.
name.
Well,
But then again, a
or
lot of names
or
like
may, or maybe
Methuselah means,
or maybe
after
when
death it's
God
sent,
or
right?
maybe when God called him to be a priest, he said, "You're new," like he did with Jacob and becoming
Right.
Israel, Abram
Sure.
becoming Abraham. He
Sure.
said, "Hey, your name is Melchizedek now because you're the king of righteousness."
Right.
Yeah, because your name used to be Shem.
But but it, well, but the reason that doesn't work is because like the writer of Hebrews is making a very fine point of Melchizedek not being there because of his genealogy.
But either is Shem. He's not there because of his genealogy
He,
either.
ab- he
He's there.
absolutely he absolutely is
No, he's not.
because he's the
No, he because it even skips because they're like, hey, you're not actually worthy. So nope, not you.
So
and
you're talking
you
about
can,
Shem, the son of Noah.
yeah. So it just so happened to be that Noah is like, oh yeah, you were called by God. You're good.
Um, well, I mean, Shem
Because
is
then
there to be a part of the genealogy of Abraham. Like there's no particular reason to think that Shem was, I mean,
there's a tradition that him and his son, what's his son's name? Eber, ran a school of priests in Jerusalem.
where does that
Yeah, I
tradition
don't
come
remember.
from?
It's one of these things, one of these books, one of these crazy books.
Okay.
I'm
Um,
still hung up on this disconnect between the Greek and the Hebrew for the word of
Yes.
order.
Matt's
Like
like, I looked up Hebrew.
I
Ah,
don't know
fuck.
what to do. Like I was giving Brian his flowers. Hey Brian, you're right on that. And Brian goes, well, in fairness though, the Greek it's taxis and like that means the other way. So like so we've
well, I don't think it necessarily means the other way. Like it could be used like
Strong's agrees with you
It's
again. It
it's
it
in
it says a fixed succession of rank or character, an official dignitary. Uh, yeah, I mean it's you
yeah.
were dead right.
The Dead Sea Scrolls is where some of this is at too. So
so
So like this,
pretty
I feel like I have to go dive into this rabbit hole deeper because I'm wondering if this is one of those Masoretic Septuagint disconnects where the Dead Sea Scroll.
or I mean some scholars just like, hey, it doesn't work with our narrative, so maybe eh.
so
So
where
have you heard of Eli Shurkin, the
hmm.
digger in
The
Israel?
what? I'm sorry.
The digger, the sand digger over there in Israel. So this guy in 2010, he did some excavating in Jerusalem, and he believes that he found a an altar that perhaps belonged to Melchizedek because the stones that it was set upon and some of the temple stuff was uh was dated to Abraham time. And he goes on about Hezekiah buried one of the temples, right? So and why did he do that? It's like a weird because it's a zero temple, so it's kind of strange that Solomon had the first temple, then there was the second temple period. But what about this Melchizedek temple period, and why don't we talk about it? So it's basically saying there's a gap in some Judaism, and it doesn't really matter to Christians because they have Jesus. So
Go back to the end point. It's like
right,
nobody really spends a lot of
right.
calories on this because
which is
it's
which is why the Talmud goes out of its way to like smash Melchizedek. Like all these things about Melchizedek, nope.
that's kind of why I'm pulling on this thread about the Masoretic and the Septuagint disconnect because just like the disconnect between the translations of Psalm 22, right, where the piercing was taken out in certain translations
Yeah.
because it becomes wildly messianic and prophetic, whereas if you take that away, it kind
So
of
Brian, yeah, I understand it's speculation and it's extra biblical and there's traditions but a lot of times in some traditions, especially oral ones, that there's some kind of truth that rings, and I don't know what the point is. I haven't found that,
Well,
and that's what kind of matters. But
yeah, and I think the thing that does matter is what these kind of preoccupations distract us from, which is that like because Jesus is a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, what that means is like the writer of Hebrews describes the whole like he makes the comparison between the Levitical priest they can only go into the Holy of Holies once per year. That's where the presence of God is, and this is representative of the people coming into the presence of God, kind of a just for that day, a restoration of the Garden of Eden, to cleanse the temple for the year, so they can stay in the keep stay in the presence of God as His chosen people. But when Jesus died, the curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, um, which indicates that the way into the presence of God is now open. And so
I guess the significance was there a way to the presence of God before the Levitical priesthood? Adam talked to God, Abraham talked to God, like talked to God, not had prophetic dreams. So Methuselah talked to God, Enoch, which these are this is the line, by the way. It went from Adam to Canaan to Enoch, and then when Enoch was taken, there was like a little gap, and then all the angels like, oh, by the way, we took your dad, Methuselah, you're now the king of righteousness. And then he his son Lamech, and according to Jewish tradition, Lamech wasn't a very godly dude, but Noah was, and that's why Noah got the whole ark business, and that by Methuselah's name, as soon as he died, he's out. So it's interesting that in Josephus' Antiquities, Adam knew that there was going to be a cleansing by water and a cleansing by fire. He didn't know which one was coming first. So that's kind of a interesting thread that Josephus pulls on. And it wasn't until his grandson Canaan, he knew, he's like, yeah, it's gonna be water. And then when Noah got the word that 120 years, Noah and Methuselah still preached, still trying to get the people to repent, even though they knew that we had all these apostasies over the last 1,000 years. So this is probably kind of moot, but we do it anyway. We do, we do.
Imagine Adam knew that, and he's like, "That's my bad, guys."
Well, Adam knew that coming, didn't know when. He
Right,
just
but the
knew that.
point is, it was coming because of him.
Oh
What was
yeah, oh, yeah.
Josephus basing that on?
That's a good question. Probably the ancient book of Jasher,
Yeah.
not the Middle Ages. Yeah, sure. But it just also shows that there's the fact that Josephus wrote the Antiquities. Did he just make it up, or was this something that was circulating at that time?
Um,
Now I know he's an agent of Rome, but and he gave
yeah,
like
I mean, I
A
don't,
Roman twist. But the early Jew stuff, why would he need to do that?
yeah, and I don't write him off as a source for early Jewish belief, but a lot of this, but not all, Second Temple Jewish writing sh should be taken as, as credible. And
But just because it's not taken as credible, does that mean none of it is credible?
I think that if we believe the Bible, I think that I think if we believe the Bible, that renders much of this speculation moot. Like the biblical writers just didn't see fit to tell us about any priesthood of Shem and Methuselah and like this. That wasn't.
Well, maybe it's because they didn't think they needed to because they told us about Melchizedek. Right? Like sometimes some stuff is, and I'm not arguing with you,
Or
Brian.
or
I'm just
or you
pointing
were
out that
supposed to already know.
I saw a thing. Just as this is corollary, so give me a
Well,
second. Give me a
but
second
none
to
of
explain this.
but my point that I was making is that like the fact that none of this is discussed or acknowledged in the New Testament, and they're telling us exactly what Melchizedek meant, what those he's explaining what those verses mean. Like we don't that kind of settles the speculation. If we were meant to think that Melchizedek was just one in a long line of priests, and then Jesus inherited that role. Well, one, that's
Well, it was
again that
pointing to a
No,
Messiah.
I don't think what you're
I don't
saying
think
is
we're
even
saying that.
accurate. I
Right.
don't think anybody's saying that we're supposed to believe that Melchizedek was one in a long line. That's why his genealogy was
That's like
explicitly
saying
not.
that the king of the Jews and David is a long line, and then Jesus. Well, no, he's a long line
Melchizedek
of
was
kings.
explicitly not given a genealogy. We're not supposed to care about how long his line was before. We're simply supposed to believe that he existed and was a priest of God. Period. Like the fact where he came from, we're not supposed to worry about it because it's not relevant.
well, that's my
But we do
point.
know where he came from.
Well, that's kind of my point. Like there's all this speculation
Well,
about like trying to connect Melchizedek to these earlier and later to these earlier figures when
so
there's
so
no reason for that. It
so I
doesn't serve
watched
any
a I
purpose.
watched a I watched a video the other day. Okay, let me tell us a quick story because this matters. This is absolutely relevant. It was about it was about abortion. Okay. And the person, I forget who it was, they made the case that abortion is never mentioned in the Bible. And their position is that because they don't believe that anybody felt it necessary to tell people that abortion was bad, because abortion was so bad that even pagan Canaanites, etc., punished abortion. So if even the most evil, bad people in the ancient Near Eastern times didn't accept abortion, there's no way to take the leap that the early Hebrews or Israelites would have accepted abortion as a behavior. And so for that reason, the Bible is quiet on it. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't done any research into ancient abortion, right? Like, I don't, it's a weird rabbit hole that I don't intend to go down. But the point that's being made is we often talk about the fact that you have to consider the mindset of the audience that the Bible was written, for whom the Bible was written, right? It wasn't for us. And that there were certain things that were just taken at face value. There were certain things that were understood and some things that didn't need to be said. I don't know if that's true or not with regards
Okay,
to abortion, right? But the flip side of that argument is why modern rabbinic Jews are pro choice because the Bible is quiet on abortion. That's literally their reason for it. They're like, it's not mentioned in the Bible, so I can do it.
so uh,
You don't see the linkage
walk,
to what you were just
yeah,
saying.
walk this into the whole Melchizedek thing.
Well, I'm just saying it's possible that there were things that were known that didn't need to be spelled out.
Okay, but we're talking about a priesthood, and a priesthood is someone who mediates between God and man.
Hmm.
Guess because the Bible
The,
narrative
the
went to the
the
Levitical side.
Bible tells us a lot about priesthoods
Hmm.
and about individuals who mediated between God and man.
Hmm.
It doesn't say all of this other stuff. All this other stuff is totally speculative and camping and getting in, getting preoccupied with was there a Melchizedekian priesthood that was beyond the individual person of Melchizedek? It kind of distracts from like what the Bible is telling us
Why?
about the priesthood.
Why does
Like
it
what
distract from it?
I mean, that's like saying I can't watch football.
Right. Like I don't get why it distracts from it. It's like a tertiary point. It's just there.
Right.
Well, the idea that there's this other priesthood that's just not being talked about, that we have to kind of like cobble it together from all these other sources
We don't have
outside
to
of the
do anything
Bible.
with it. That's kind of my point on this. We don't have to do anything with it. It tells us what we need to know, that it was a foreshadowing of the Messiah.
Yep.
That's it. Like that's all we need to know is that it was a foreshadow and it exists and it's like, hey, state, remember this because this is going to be on the test later,
But it's
right? And then
significant because it's been used over the last 2,000 years to make other ideas and all these other denominations, and it's given Protestants uh, permission to create other denominations, and they go back to Melchizedek. So it's not just me making these speculations, it's modern day Christians that don't even know that those speculations were made when their denomination was formed.
I,
So
I mean, Brian, I agree with you in that like overdoing this analysis doesn't isn't necessarily useful as long as we accept that it ends with Jesus.
and believe it or not, I agree with that too.
Right? Like if everybody was like, "Hey, there's some wild stuff we don't know, might have been shim, but it doesn't matter because it ends with Jesus." Then like the rest of
Well,
it's just like convert. It's interesting. It's like the reason that we do this show half the time. It's
Like
interesting. Does it
reading
matter?
the Godawa
but
novels was fun.
Right.
but when you ask, how can I say it can't be true? My answer to that is and I think the writer of Hebrews tells us that in chapter 5. Like he's quite explicit that Jesus became the priest in the order of Melchizedek
Hmm.
through his death. Um, I think it somewhat dilutes that when we consider, well, maybe there are these other priests according to the order of Melchizedek. I don't know how Melchizedek got his priesthood. but the
Was right. So
but
if you
the
got it,
but the but the overriding point of that it tells us about priesthoods in general is that there is no priesthood can function without death. Um, like death is the price of being in the presence of God. And so Jesus' singular death is the only death that could create a permanent forever priesthood. Um, and so he's only being compared to Melchizedek in these particular respects. That he's a priest and a king, and that it's based on his own merits, not his genealogy. Um, Beyond that, we don't really know much else about Melchizedek, or what the priesthood of Melchizedek entailed. I would I think it would be safe to say there was some kind of sacrifice involved, because there always is. But the
there is.
point,
So I think in the Testament of Noah, which is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it explicitly lays out what Noah does uh for his priesthood and when he passes it to Shem as he dies.
All I'm getting at is it's clearly an important priesthood for the writer of Hebrew to go out of their way to remind us that Jesus is a part of this order. Right? Like
And
that's my
Noah
only
does
this
sure.
is
well,
I'm invoking Heiser here because it's weird, right?
right.
And if it's weird, it's relevant, right? Because why? Why bring up this dude that got mentioned in two sentences in two weird parts of the Bible and no one knows what the hell to do with, and then put it on Jesus in Hebrew? Like there's a real reason to do this, and we're supposed to take something from that.
Yeah,
That's my only point here.
and it's worth pointing out that the Qumran community, the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Mhm.
like they're in a time where they're looking ahead to the Messiah. They're trying to figure out what the Messiah is going to look like based on these clues that we like Psalm 110.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so a lot of that, it is one, it doesn't necessarily reflect the broader, I mean, it absolutely doesn't reflect the broader Second Temple thinking. Um, like they were a community unique unto themselves, and they're they explicitly rejected the legitimacy of the Jerusalem establishment. But they didn't have the benefit of the Messiah having come and having taught his disciples what his role meant. They didn't have the benefit of the writer of Hebrews explaining all this to them. Like this is they're kind of creating like a I think the epistle to the Hebrews kind of renders all of that moot. Like it's interesting from an academic standpoint to consider like what did Melchizedek mean to this community? Um, but it kind of renders it like all of their speculation. Well, they're speculating in this certain direction about what the priesthood of Melchizedek meant. Um, but they were incorrect. The writer of Hebrews explains it in a way that precludes all of that. So like they didn't have the benefit of having another book of the Bible as we do that explains it all and puts it all together for
Yeah, no,
us.
I mean, again, I agree with that. I think it's interesting, and
But did they put it together? Did Hebrews put it together? They just ended it. They just didn't put it together. They said, "Yeah, it's this thing." What thing?
well, so that's kind of the funny thing is what Brian was saying about Hebrews 5 when it says that Christ had to die in order to be a priest in the order of Melchizedek, which is weird, right? Like, because pretty sure Melchizedek didn't die on a cross and then get resurrected. But the very next sentence, which is broken because of the way our modern Bibles are done, The very next sentence is, "We have much to say about this, but it's hard to make it clear to you because you no longer try to understand." It's so they broke it, whoever did the breaks in the verses and whatever, right? Made it sound like, okay, we're done talking about Melchizedek, we're moving on. But I would take that sentence and push it back up with the stuff about Melchizedek because I'm like, wait, what? What?
Well,
Like, I just told you what you need to know about Melchizedek. The rest of it, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
well,
and I tell
he
you
did.
more, but you stopped asking, so I'm moving
Well,
on.
he did pick it up again after he got done laying into him for
Right, he
being
bitches at him
lazy and
about you
apathetic.
should be eating and you can only drink milk and you can't eat solid food and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I just it's funny how it's broken so hard
Yeah.
when you're looking at it because it has a heading, right? Warning against falling away, and this is the NIV. But it's like, wait,
Who said that?
the writer of Hebrew.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Who?
I reference that a lot to like the fact that he the warning against losing salvation. It's not because they're consorting with prostitutes or it's some other obvious, and they're apathetic. They can't be bothered to learn, and so it occasions this dire warning. And
So maybe he's just like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't need to tell you about Melchizedek.
That's exactly kind of
You
like he's like, you know
know,
what,
I was
y'all.
gonna tell you, and you look at me all glazed over. Go to Chow, devils. Go to Chow.
so, as a kind of a tangential passage, it's not like I imagine that if the writer of Hebrews had more patience and maybe more parchment, um, he might have included this. But in the prophet Zechariah chapter 6, it reads, the word of the Lord came to me, take silver and gold from the exiles Heldai, Tobijah, and Judea who have arrived from Babylon. Go the same day to the house of Josiah, son of Zephaniah. Take the silver and gold and make a crown and set it on the head of the high priest Joshua, son of Jehozadak. Tell him this is what the Lord Almighty says. Here is the man whose name is the branch. And the branch is a messianic title from Isaiah 11, where he says, "A root shall come up from the stump of Jesse, uh, from his roots a branch will come forth." So he's the branch of David, is a messianic title. So here he takes a crown, puts it on the head of the high priest Joshua, Yeshua, Jesus, tells him, "Here is the man whose name is the branch." So it's saying that the Messiah's name will be Joshua. It is he who will build the temple of Yahweh, and he will be clothed with majesty and will sit and rule on his throne, and he will be a priest on his throne, and there will be harmony between the two. So it's just kind of a cool little
Yeah.
messianic prophecy about that the Messiah will be a priest on his throne as king, and his name will be Joshua. So you know, ties into the
Uh,
Melchizedek motif.
So
I want to
so by
ask.
the
I want to
way,
ask.
real
Okay,
so
go ahead.
the second half of Hebrews 7, right? The heading for those that are looking at it, right, starts at verse 11 and it says Jesus like Melchizedek, and it's talking about the order, not that Melchizedek was like Jesus. Um, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says if perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed they were given the law, like, they could have been perfect, but they weren't, then why was there a need for another priest to come from in the order of Melchizedek and not from the order of Aaron? Right? So that's one of the things that I find interesting because it's saying, look, the line of Aaron wasn't good enough. So we had to go back to the Melchizedek line because you guys suck.
It was
Well,
pure at that time.
it
Not line from a genealogical sense. Brian, I'm not trying to overdraw the lines. I'm just saying what's being said here, right? Then it says you drop down and then, for it is declared you're a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Then drop down some more and it says, and it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn he will not change his mind. You're a priest forever, right? Because of this oath, Jesus has become the grantor of a better covenant. So this is a new covenant thing, right? Then this is the verse that these next two. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. And then this closes out. It says, "For the law appoints as high priestmen in all their weakness, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son who's been made perfect forever." So it ties this off to the point that Brian was making. None of this matters now, right? Like a bunch of bad stuff happened. We tried, gave you the law. They sucked. Line of Aaron, that the priesthood of Melchizedek had to reinstitute that. Jesus showed up. God made him part of that. My only thing I was pointing out is that line that says there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, and that's just super interesting because it doesn't say they got too old. So to Dre's point, you aged out of being a priest from the Levitical line.
God chose the next
That's
Zadok.
right.
Like
That's
so
so so
in
so
in
this is
fact
just interesting.
there was a
But
couple of moments where it gets passed way before the guy dies. Like, oh, you're actually the next dude. So
it just
Enoch, for instance. Oh, Enoch's you walk with God, bro. You're
you're
the
on
king
Mount
of
Rushmore.
righteousness. Yeah, yeah.
But it's just interesting because he says there was many of those, and I feel like you have to assume he's talking about the order of Melchizedek because death wouldn't be what prevented them from continuing if they had to stop being a priest at 50.
Well,
I don't know
no.
if the Aaronic priesthood has stopped being after it transitioned from Levi to Aaron.
The
I
the,
don't I
the
don't
law
know.
would still carry it though, right?
Well,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't matter.
it
Like it's just an interesting.
I found an interesting passage just in Ezekiel, uh, at the end of Ezekiel in 48, when they start portioning off the land, and then 48:11. This will be for the consecrated priests, the Zadokites, who were faithful serving me, and not they did not go astray like the Levites did when the Israelites went astray. So it's interesting that the Zadok kids get their own piece of of the land.
yeah, this is kind of a that passage in Ezekiel is a kind of a tricky it's a tricky passage. It talks about it's often cited as I don't know if we want to get into this, but it's often cited as a messianic prophecy, but it describes a Levitical priesthood in operation, making offerings for the prince, the uh, the the prince being the restored dynasty of David, um, which is nonsensical based on the whole point of Hebrews being that system has been rendered obsolete. So
Sounds like a different episode because yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a
for
lot to
sure.
unpackage.
But
well,
yeah,
I have a quick solution. Um, I would I would propose that it's not actually a prophecy; it's a conditional promise that God is making. Like if when you come back from exile, if you keep the law, this is what will happen. This is what life will be like. This is what I will do for Israel. This is the what your way of life will be. Um, but and we can tell that it's not a prophecy because it doesn't include that formula that repeats like 50 times in Ezekiel where he says, when this happens, then you will know that I am Yahweh, or then you will know that a prophet has been among you. He's not saying this is something that absolutely will happen. He's making a promise that if you come back and if when I restore you to the land, if you keep the covenant, if you obey the law, this is what will happen. The problem is they never really kept the covenant when they came back, and like the whole
yeah,
point of it is
but
that
this passage talks about actual uh, territorying off land for priests, one for the Zadokites and one
yeah,
for the Levites. So
yeah.
that's an interesting the Zadokites, Zadok, Melchizedek.
Well, that's not the same thing.
Oh,
Um,
of course not.
well, I mean,
We don't need to get into it. It's okay.
it was just not like this.
Yeah, yeah.
The Zadokites are they're part of the Levitical order. They're not the
Oh,
Melchizedek. they're not Melchizedekian priests.
Well, we don't even know who Melchizedekian priests are at this point.
Well, we know they're not Levitical.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I guess we do know.
I mean, just off of Hebrews 7, just off that thing that I just read.
So we did this this was a listener request, and she had a series of questions that she wanted us to answer.
We
Should
probably
we go?
answered none of them.
I hope we answered all of them,
Well,
and
then
we
we're done.
can.
Good.
But do you want to go through these, see if we got them all?
Rattle them off real quick. Yeah,
All
might as
right.
well. If we're this deep, by the way, for the listeners leading up into this, Brian's like, man, there's not going to be much to talk about, guys. There's only like 2 verses. 2 hours later, here we are.
2 hours later.
Well,
Maybe if we
okay.
would just
So
stop interrupting him and let him go for his 10 minutes, we could have just got out of here.
What are the questions?
she asked, why is Jesus' priesthood anchored in Melchizedek and not his divine sonship? Um, I think we've kind of answered that, but it's not like I wouldn't
I don't think it's a
characterize it
I wouldn't
as
call
straightforward.
it anchored.
Yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as anchored. And it's not even I wouldn't even say it's anchored in his divine sonship. I mean it is
it takes all of those things to make him what he is, right?
it's predominantly, I mean, according to what the writer of Hebrews writes, his he was perfected as a priest through what he suffered. He's
Right.
the fact that he's sinless, and it's not actually because he's divine so much as because he's human that he can become a priest for humans. And the writer of Hebrews makes a point that he was in every way like us, but he was without sin. And being without sin, of course, he's without sin because of his divine nature. So in that sense, it is anchored in his divine sonship. Um,
Yeah.
but
But it's also interesting because, in Hebrews 7, it also, the writer says, typically, I'm paraphrasing, typically the high priest has to do all of these uh, sacrifices all the time. Jesus doesn't have to sacrifice day after day for his own sins and then for the sins of people. He sacrificed for their sins once and for all when he offered himself, right? Like, so that's a big part of it. And then jump up to verse 25. This is a Catholic gotcha. Therefore, he's able to save completely for those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Hmm.
You don't say.
Hmm.
Okay.
So
yeah, they have a way of lawyering that,
I'm
but
sure they do. They're wrong.
that's
What's
another
the
episode.
what's the next question?
Um, is Melchizedek human or a member of the divine council, maybe? Yeah, he's human. I would, the idea that he is a divine being or an eternal being, I think that comes from a kind of a misreading of what it says about the
Right.
without father and without
Right.
mother.
Mhm.
It's just emphasizing,
He's not Anakin Skywalker.
And we all know that Shem is human. So
Clearly.
was
Well, not to
Salem.
mention, if he wasn't human, then the whole point of aligning
Jesus
this
taking that.
priesthood and Jesus taking it,
Right.
Jesus wouldn't be human to take it. So
Right. Right.
that's kind of, I think we're all in violent agreement there.
Um, And she asked about the place of Salem. We got into that. Yeah, Salem is just Jerusalem.
According to Brian, Matt has no idea.
According
It's
to just about every scholar ever
Okay.
in the history of scholardom.
I'll go
yeah,
with it.
it's not.
Even Bart Ehrman thinks so.
Yeah.
Well, now
I don't even know that. I don't even know that to be true. But
I I would be surprised if Bart Ehrman disputed that Salem
I think,
was
yeah,
Jerusalem. Like
it's
that's not really in doubt.
it's
But
non-controversial.
that
Is that our
was
last question? Should have more questions?
that was it.
Oh, there we go. We killed it.
Hey, we answered
It only
questions.
took us 2 hours to answer 3 questions in the blind. What do you know?
Um,
That should be our new gimmick. Somebody should
Oh.
say, "Hey, talk about this," and
Hold
then
on,
we
I
should have
missed
the
one.
questions, but not look at them ahead of time. And then we should just talk about it for a while and then see if we answered the questions.
like we're doing now.
Yeah.
I think it's a good
Well,
gimmick.
hold on.
I like it.
She kind of has one more.
Okay.
I really want to know. I really want to know number one. Was about anchored in Melchizedek and the implications for us. I guess that he is the priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Well, the implication for us, we read, is that um, we are seated with Christ in the heavenlies. The fact that he is our priest and he's interceding with God for us means that we are representatively in the presence of God with him, and God is present in us through the Holy Spirit, which makes actually us a priesthood. Um, which is what I was saying before
I
about
heard
how
you say that. Yeah.
all those denominational spin-offs who were claiming to be the Melchizedekian priesthood, so we don't need Rome. Well, we're already there, actually. Like every Christian is by definition a priest, which means like we intercede with God on behalf of humanity, and we represent God to humanity. Um, and so, yeah. So, did we solve Melchizedek, guys?
Except we still don't know why Melchizedek was such an interesting dude. But that's
Why
yeah,
Melchizedek?
but that feels like a nice Eastern Orthodox mystery that we'll just have to learn later on.
No,
I
I found him kind of fascinating just because of the implications that Christians have just used and drawn on, you know, a couple of verses in the Bible to create their own theology
Mm.
and go down rabbit holes. And apparently in the Middle Ages, they wrote fan fiction, right? So it's it it's the Heiser weird stuff that when there's holes, people want to fill them.
Yep.
And it's interesting that John Calvin and Martin Luther, they're like, yeah, it says what it says, and it doesn't matter. That was their take.
Hmm.
They're like,
I worked with a
don't
guy.
don't don't go too far with it.
Uh,
And because and that's when they started being like, hey, there was a lot of that speculation going on at that time. And that's when like, look, if it doesn't say it, like Pixar didn't happen, right? So then they were of the Brian in the beginning of the show, like, Dre, shut up. We're not talking about all that stuff. Let's read about what it says because that's going to take up the whole 2 hours and you won't get to speak. So we and that was he John Calvin me, and it's fine. You know, it's fine. But that's the conclusion they came to in the for the Reformation. And I think that's an interesting thing that it kind of went from the Second Temple period all the way to the Reformation with all of that text. And it was fun, whatever.
yeah. I worked with a guy, Matt Handler, shout out Matt. And he used to have this saying that if there's not enough information, people will write their own story. And it usually ends up being a horror movie, right? Because
Yeah, right.
they make it bad because they're going to fill in all the gaps with their own ideas. And I think this sounds like it's, one of those things. We didn't get into it. I don't want to take us back into the rabbit hole, but I do think it's super interesting that we didn't talk about Melchizedek's food, the food offering, the wine and
Oh,
the
the bread
bread.
and wine.
Yeah.
Um,
And that there's the church fathers
Church fathers
origin
went off on it. That was like their
all the
thing
way
about it.
down to
Yeah.
Augustine. They were like
Yes.
this. Augustine was like that was the Eucharist, and it's like
Right.
that's and that gets super weird. But also obviously the church fathers were Catholic, so they
it,
they overdo the Eucharist to a point also. So
it is an extremely enticing idea. I can't I, I
it's hard
can't
to it's
just
so symbolic. It's hard to overlook it.
right. I can't just like dismiss that, but there's also not really any information that
It
says
one could just say it was a symbolic prophecy. right? Like
Or
he
one could just say they had abundance and their boys needed some bread and wine because they just got finished
I
with some
kind of see
battle.
it as like an Office episode where he comes out with the bread and wine and goes, "Hey, y'all want bread and wine?" Looks at the camera and winks and then gives it to him, and then they go about their business, right? And we know only because we've seen what happens,
Right.
1,000+ years later.
They're like, I'm
But
kind of hungry.
yeah, they were
And
just
I
like,
and,
"Dope,
and
I could always use
everybody
some
likes
bread and
wine.
wine," right?
You're
Yeah.
right.
Anyway,
Um,
that was my only other thought.
yeah.
But we didn't touch on that. But
Got a
Uh,
final thought, Brian?
well, I'm bummed that we didn't get to talk about how he shows up every 30 days to menace Superman and has to be and
You know what? I am
Superman has to trick him into saying
I need
spelling
the
his name
audience to
backwards.
know that that was my joke.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna I was gonna
I need to have credit for this Superman joke.
I was gonna credit you. I
I
was
believe
gonna
I appreciate that.
for the non-comic book nerds, you guys should explain that.
so
Because I'm going to go out on a limb that neither Linda nor Mike had a clue what you're talking about.
everybody knows about Mixes Pedelec.
Right. Because he's big on the Super Friends. And if my mom watched Saturday morning cartoons with me,
Yeah.
because he's a silly character in the Super Friends, the silly show.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, Mixes Pedelec is an imp from the fifth dimension who shows up every month to menace Superman and like play pranks on him, and Superman has to trick him into spelling his name backwards, and that banishes him back to the fifth dimension. And it's he's probably like my most hated Superman villain.
Oh, easily. How do you say his name again?
Mixes Pedelec.
And you see how that works with Melchizedek?
Yeah, that was clever. That was
So,
I'm jealous that I didn't come up with it.
yeah, not
So
just a hat rack.
For Dodger hats.
Back to back champs.
Yeah,
I love LA.
it's pretty rare.
City champions. City
Tough.
of fucking champions.
Hey, take it easy.
But yeah, so,
Take your baseball win because
oh, yeah, I hate LeBron. Anyway,
hey, everybody, go out and vote tomorrow for Republicans.
are there any votes in Oklahoma?
I don't think
I don't
so.
think we have an election at all, right?
I'm talking to our nationwide audience.
Those in
we got
Virginia, go vote for
we got
go vote for the first black female governor of Virginia.
Yeah.
because if you don't vote for the white one, you're sexist. I heard that. That was great. And the NAACP also backs her, by the way. So
And Barack Obama.
can't make this up. California has the big Prop 50 with the gerrymandering things.
Oh yeah, that's a big one actually. That's
Yeah, yeah.
huge. Yeah. And also don't vote for the nasty Muslim in New York.
Or Michigan.
Is Ilham up for
No, there.
Oh, the other guy.
Yeah.
It's for a mayor
That's
in somewhere. I don't remember the city, but
That's right.
But yeah, Zoran Mamdani is probably going to be the mayor of New York, and that's
Terrible.
gonna. My hope is that that will be a turning point for the country, and seeing how badly things go in New York, people will lose their taste for.
Yeah.
Because it won't go badly in New York. We'll bail them out.
It will go no, it'll go badly, but people aren't going to care because
Right.
there's already talk of the thousands of people that are going to leave.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Governor Abbott of Texas put out a memo today that he would double tax anybody moving from New York to Texas in the next year. He said, stay in New York and fix your own state. Don't bring those problems here.
Is that legal? Can you do
Wow.
that?
They
He
do it in
said it.
college.
I don't know.
I hope it is.
Like it was crazy.
Yeah,
But the funny
that's,
thing is, I'm like, but bro, the people that vote for him aren't going to be the ones that leave. So it's kind of unfair. The ones that are like
Right.
trying, they're like, we're trying,
Like,
dude.
I'm trying to pay in your state.
He should say, unless you can show me your voter card, like take a picture of it and then show me you voted for
Red
Cuomo,
only.
and then
Red only.
then I won't tax you. But anyway, yeah, don't vote for that guy.
Yeah.
He's bad news. He's lousy, no good.
No
Yeah.
good.
That's my final thought.
Well, in that case,
No,
you
no
know,
Islam in America. Out of here.
you should. I mean, Japan, Poland.
we should have an Islam episode.
Hey, I
I ain't
can't wait.
scared.
Well,
In fact, I just got a new shirt from Ranger Up. I'll wear it for our next episode, and it's got the Cairo cross on it, and it says "I'm not hiding." I thought that was kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you should definitely stay curious, stay enlightened, and we'll talk about something next week. God bless.